So I'm just going to start us off with a recap of kind of what we've already talked about last week, and just kind of show you where we're going to go from here, because it is going to get a little bit confusing, because we're going to actually start mixing in some John here in a little bit, and they're going to kind of meet, and then we'll talk about a little bit with his journey and everything. So I have to step up here. Sorry, y'all, I'm short. So we've already talked about our journeys in Philippi. We talked about Thessalonica, Berea. We talked about Athens. So then we're going to talk about Corinth. So that's what Mom's going to cover today. And then we get to talk about the intersections between Paul and John, which is going to be Ephesus. These are going to be additional locations. This is a non-biblical one, and that is the island of Santorini. We're not going to talk about that one, so if you guys start wondering where that island came in, we're not going to talk about that one as much. We're going to talk about Patmos with John, and then we're going to talk about, go ahead and go to the next one. Yeah. Briefly. Oh, other way, Mom. Other way. There you go. Then we're going to talk about a little bit about Paul's journey to Rome, because that is where we also get Crete, which is one of our stops. So we'll talk about that when we get there. But unfortunately, Paul, you notice, did not return from Rome. So we're going to talk about that and how that actually affected a little bit of what John ended up doing. So, all right.
Whoops, sure.
Went to Cyprus because that was the first person.
It's over here. I'm sorry.
Crete and the Cyprus is where they went from Antioch.
Yes. So yeah, I can do that whole. If you want to go back one, we'll do because so they had Antioch here. So we had the fleeing of Jerusalem and you had Antioch, and then there's a lot through Asia. Cyprus was on the way back from Ephesus in the second journey, and then back to Caesarea and Jerusalem. Then you go from the third journey back. But we didn't go to Cyprus, and we didn't go to Rhodes. So
just Tarsus, because that's Paul's hometown. See up in the neck
above.
Right above
yes.
There you go.
Right up there. Yeah. There you go. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and really, just these names pop up. So the two islands, Cyprus, Crete, you just need to know they don't put Rome.
By the way, this is not gatekeeped. This was not on the tour. If you want the name of the book, that's a really good study tool that we kind of use to prep for this, not just this, but also for actually going on our trip. You can ask Mom for the name of that book because she bought it.
I'll bring it Sunday. I can't remember exactly.
Okay, yeah. So she will get you that information on Sunday if you ask for it. All right, so go ahead, Mom, and she's going to talk about Corinth.
All right, we're going to start with. I guess I hold the pointer. I got the pointer. Yeah, maybe I'll try not to hit you with it.
Right.
I get excited.
All right.
So. Oops. So this is a photo of our group. It was really hot when we were over there. And so we were just everywhere we went, whenever we were doing our devotionals, we were looking for the one shady spot we could find. And this is underneath this tree is what we were looking for. Would you go ahead and start the video?
Yes.
This is Pastor Lloyd Hamilton. He's pastor at God's Standard Ministries. And I'm hoping that those speakers will actually work. They should be up. Let's see. Go ahead.
Do you have your volume on?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's try this.
Because they worked at home last night. And they're not going to work, are they?
Well, we'll try it. We'll try it. No, come on. I don't like your...
I'm sorry.
Lino, where the click buttons are. It is not.
Well, shucks.
You want me to go to the next slide where you...
pull the plugs out of that and see if they can hear it with and the next one.
To follow Jesus, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. You have decided.
And the reason I wanted to share that, it's just standing there in such an amazingly historic place among all of these ruins. We were standing there singing, and I was trying to video, but just looking out over what was ancient Corinth, it was just really heartwarming. And the next few slides I'm going to show you are just some of those ruins. This is right as we were walking in, and this was the Fountain of Glauce, is my best guess at a pronunciation. But that was near where we went through. That wouldn't have necessarily been the entrance to Corinth. The entrance to Corinth is more like where the main road is now, and so we couldn't access it that way. But this is where it was that we went in. And right behind there, the little sort of brown building, you'll see a museum. I'll tell you a little more about that later. Yeah. This is the Temple of Apollo, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do this correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, the Temple of Apollo. And I think originally there were like 36 columns. You know, we talked about last week how they had all these Greek gods and how they just kind of reused all of the places that they had built, and this would have been one of those situations. But that's what it was originally, was the Temple of Apollo. There were like 36 of those columns, so this was a massive structure. And 7 is all that's sort of freestanding now.
That was also the oldest temple in Greece period. And like everything else, it was later converted to a church.
You see the people there in comparison.
Yeah.
Those columns are over 100 foot tall, aren't they?
They're
I
pretty
think
close.
so, yeah.
Okay.
They're
How do you
not.
stand one of those up without a plane?
Very carefully.
This is a major building.
It is.
So
it is.
one of the misnomers is they did have cranes, but they were slave powered and they were wooden, which is amazing.
And not just standing them up, but then to put the
Those crosses.
cross pieces on the top. You know, you can maneuver a column with whatnot, but I mean, it is pretty remarkable. This is another feature, and of course you can see the Temple of Apollo there in the back. This sort of vaulted roof, I just kind of wanted to point that out because architecturally, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, we were talking about this was created thousands of years ago, and I'm sure it's been re-put together, but just the fact that they knew how to do these things, and things have survived much better than what we build today does.
So
Go ahead.
we were in the forum for this, and those archways were individual shops, and it would have completely surrounded the forum marketplace area that we were in. And they said, and part of the reason I got that shot as well was they said the first churches were one-off little shops once it was legalized, and then they took over the Temple of Apollo. I just kind of kept liking that reiteration of stuff.
And
was in
this
secret.
photo was taken from our devotional spot across the way.
Sorry, go ahead.
Here's a map just to kind of show you where things are. This is where we were having our devotional, where I put the little red ring. This would have been the Temple of Apollo. And then the little shops and whatnot would have been all around in here. Is there anything else on there you wanted to point out that we're going to talk about?
Unless you want to point out where we're going as far as I forget what it's called.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It should.
So in Corinth, Paul, of course, you know, Paul tends to get into trouble, but where he pled his case is, actually, that's where he pled his case. We actually had our devotional over here.
Yes.
That's why I've got that circled.
Yes.
That's where Paul pled his case.
Bema is what it's called.
Yes.
I couldn't remember if it was Bema or Berkeley.
So like I said, once again, the Jewish leaders weren't really fond of what Paul was talking about. And this is the location where he was brought to plead his case before Gallio, I think is the pronunciation. And I believe he would have stood like right in this area. We'll zero in on that sign in that picture, but he would have been facing up to plead his case. And that is where he kind of got to say, you know, here's my deal. And I believe this is where Gallio said, this is not a matter of our laws and our issues. This is a church matter, and therefore, basically, I'm not going to hear it. And you have no standing for this, bringing him in front of me here. So I thought that was pretty cool.
There you go. There's your.
Oh, there it is. So this is the verse from Acts 18, or verses 12 through 16. And when Gallio was pre-consul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, "This man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law." But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. Since it's a matter of questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be the judge of these things." And he drove them away from the tribunal. So I thought that was pretty cool. We were there when that happened. So here's another little thing. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this video or not, but Pastor Lloyd really enjoyed acronyms and things that sort of help you remember things. And this was one of his favorites, faith. And that faith, the way he remembers it, is that you're fully anticipating it to happen. That's what faith is. It's a really good definition of what faith is. Let's try to play him talking about it. He does a much better job.
Something that should challenge our faith. Faith, amen? F-A-I-T-H. Acronym, we say fully anticipate it. Just that acronym. Faith, F-A-I-T-H. Fully anticipate it. Amen. Hebrews says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So faith is not empty, it's substance. Amen. Amen.
So I'm not sure if you could hear what Pastor Lloyd was saying, but he was quoting a verse in the Bible that says, faith is the substance of things unseen. And his point in that was that faith is not empty. Faith is substance. There's substance in it. And that really resonated. I just like that a lot.
All right.
These are just some touristy shots of me and Katie. Like I said, they're at the ruins, at different places in the ruins. And the next one is the one that got us in trouble.
I'm not touching it, by the way.
She didn't touch it, but they were not fond of her being that close to it. So we were sort of reprimanded for like attempting that. This is the Corinth Canal, and it was actually finished, I believe, was it 1893? Let me see if I've got that date in here. I don't think I have it, but I believe it was 1893. Anyway, this is a pretty big deal. It's about a 5-mile canal. The widest part of it at sea level is about 82 feet. So like a lot of the modern ships can't go through here, but it really sort of changed, sailing for folks 150 something, 170 something years ago. Before that, if they didn't want to sail all the way around Greece, which was like 430 miles or something, the only alternative was to take the boat and its cargo across that 5-mile stretch on land. And that's what that piece of road is. They've preserved that. And the way they described it, it was sort of like a railway. It wasn't like a road, like it was like they somehow put the boats on like tracks of some sort to get them from the Ionian Sea to the Aegean Sea. So big improvement when that was completed, but back in 2,000 years ago, they actually, around 64 BC, I think Caesar looked at trying to do a canal, but it was just so, it was just such a huge project. They just didn't think they could do it. So it wasn't done until, like I said, less than 200 years ago. But it's still a neat thing to look at. Go ahead. So, did you want to talk about John before? I'm not sure how this.
No, go ahead.
This popped in here
Because that's when we have it. Because we're going to talk about Ephesus after
Okay.
with John.
So I think we're just barely going to touch on Crete, but one of the things that it was just interesting, how the Bible refers, and Paul said in his letter to Titus, he did not call them like liars. He said one of their own said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons, but he didn't disagree with them either. So I thought that was interesting. He seemed to be a man who understood the culture of the time, but at the same time was eloquent enough to get his point across in a lot of things. Go ahead, Katie.
All right.
You want to do this?
Sure. So
I'll turn the baton over.
Yeah, thank you. So this is kind of the little bit of history that we put together for John's journey, because there's not really maps of John's journey, and that's because it's he didn't go as nearly as many places as Paul, and part of that was because he wasn't really charged the same assignment as the other apostles. He still did evangelizing and everything, but he wasn't. He wasn't, that wasn't necessarily originally his main focus. But the thing about John is, when we start talking about this, we're not talking about John the Baptist. Every other name, pretty much, unless it's John Mark, is assigned to this particular John. And so it's John the Apostle, John the Evangelist, John the Revelator, John of Patmos, that's where that's going to come from, and then John the Beloved, and then Son of Thunder. So I took that to mean that he was loud, but the thing that I found interesting is when you translate that into Greek, it probably would have made everybody listen to him a lot more in the Greek cultures, like in Ephesus, because they would have been calling him the son of the head of the gods. In other words, the son of Zeus, who is one of their mythical folk heroes. So I thought that was kind of one of those fun little things of there was a plan. They just couldn't see the plan, but looking back, we can see the plan. So I'm going to get into the verses of how John's journey came to be. But John and Mary came to Ephesus around, we don't have great records of it. They didn't go, we left for Ephesus today. It took us this much time. They didn't really leave records like that. So it's approximately 38 and 47 AD. The other thing that's important to remember about this is John's about 6 years younger than Jesus. We don't know if it was 8 years younger. We don't know if it was 5 or 4 years younger. So it's approximately 6. So that kind of gives you an idea of how old he is. Now, Mary, we kind of lose records of her, but that's why we don't really know exactly when she died. But she died around 43 AD or 48 AD, okay? And right after this time period, I think it's interesting, that's when Paul comes to Ephesus. So towards the end of that date, that would be about the time you maybe send, hey, the Mother of God has arrived. I kind of jokingly would like to say maybe she heard Saul was coming and it scared her to death. But, by then he probably had a slightly different reputation. But anyway, that being said, so Paul was going to be in Ephesus. He was actually there for about 2.5 years, and he was therefore, at that time, the head of the Ephesian church, or as you guys know, the Ephesians. So Paul then dies when he is taken to Rome. And this is going to be around 64 to 69 AD. We're not, again, exactly sure. We know it was under a specific emperor, okay? Well, this is also around the same time period that Peter is martyred. So we got the big three. Only one of them still alive. And that's not from lack of trying, because they did, in fact, try to kill John. And they were sort of like, well, that didn't work, and kind of just shipped him back. So he then, because Peter and Paul are dead, John is now the one in charge of the Ephesian church. And he's in charge of it for a really long time. Remember, I said he's only about 6 years younger than Jesus. So he's imprisoned when he's about 90 years old on the Isle of Patmos, which is where we're going to actually talk about that story, because that's one of the things we actually think about him the most, because he's very, very old during this. He's only on the island for approximately 2 years, and then he is either released from Patmos or he dies on Patmos and they return his body to Ephesus. And he was buried in Ephesus until, I don't remember the exact date, but let's just say the Catholic Church moved it into the Vatican, moved his bones from their resting place into the Vatican. And it was to keep one of the, I don't remember which empire, but one of the Muslim empires from getting a hold of him. All right. So this is actually on Ephesus's official website, and this is talking about what John was sort of charged with. And this is why I say he didn't really go around as much as some of the others, but he did do a lot of writing, which is very helpful for us. So John's gospel states, and this is literally the direct quote, so I'm just going to read it. When on the cross, Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, so that was beloved, that's John, standing beside her, and he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that hour, the disciple took her into his home and never separated again. So that's part of the reason why we think that she went to Ephesus, because some sects say that she died in Jerusalem prior to Peter, Paul, and John leaving. Others argue that she died in Ephesus because John was in Ephesus for such a long time period. So that's where that comes from. And there's also some other evidence supporting that, because there is a traditionally orally passed down location of her last home in Ephesus. All right. So then we also mentioned Patmos. So he's John the Revelator, and that is because of what happens on Patmos. And I kind of find it interesting because it is, again, he was not martyred, and so he got another 30 years to write, and he's still imprisoned. But we go through and he says, "I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation of the kingdom and patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard him behind me, a loud voice like a trumpet, saying, 'Write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches.'" So the 7 churches: Ephesus, to Smyrna, Pergam, am I saying that right? Thyatira and Sardis, and Philadelphia and Laodicea. So Mom's going to talk about this because we actually went to the cave where John saw the revelation and received that revelation. So we're gonna go through that. My kind of thing that I find so interesting thing about John, and it may be just because I'm a little biased, because my name actually means last name Malone means devotee of Saint John in Celtic. But I find it interesting. He was the only one at the cross that stayed for that. He was the one then charged with taking care of somebody's mom, which is kind of, an important job. And he's also the only one that wasn't martyred. So I don't know if any of that has a connection. Ed, you can ask Ed that question. That's a Ed question. I'm just reporting what I was told. All right.
Ready?
Yep.
So one of the things I wanted to, thank you,
You're welcome.
to highlight is what he says at the end of verse 9. I was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God. And while we say he was exiled there, this sort of, to me, reads like I was there because I was needed to be there, because something was going to be done there. That's what I'm taking out of that. The picture that you see there on your right is this same set of verses in Greek, and that is one of the sculptures that's on the walls of the just outside the cave where John received the revelation. So this is some more of the artwork. Again, we talked about that Greek style last week, and you can see that. This particular mosaic depicts some of the visions that he saw, and it's pretty intricate. And that is above the door, one of the doorways as you're going into the cave. It was a cave back then, but there's multiple entrances and doorways now, so it's kind of modernized until you get inside. So inside the cave, you're not actually allowed to take any photos, which is why I'm showing you a photo of a photo here. This is a photo of the inside that I'm assuming the island of Patmos, whoever is in charge of taking care of this, has taken. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out to you. First of all, this is the most spiritual feeling place that I've ever been in. Katie and I have been there twice, and I still say this is the most spiritual place I feel like I've ever been in. It's palpable in that cave. I went in it again. I still got cold chills, even though we were being rushed through. It just feels like this is a good place for me to visit. I'm glad I went here.
I also firmly believe that that's because that's the only place we've ever been where Christ physically manifested himself. So that haven't been to the Holy Land to tell if you get that same feeling, but I'll let Mom continue.
So a couple of things I want to point out. This rock is said to have, when Paul heard the trumpets.
Not Paul.
I'm
John.
sorry, I'm so used to talking about Paul.
I know.
When John heard the trumpets, thank you. That's the area of the rock that it came from, and that rock cleft into 3 parts at that time. And I mean, it doesn't look like it should be holding up there, yet it is. And it's a pretty cool thing to look at. Another couple of things. You notice this little area over here with the fence around it? When Katie and I went there 12 years ago, that little brass fencing section wasn't there. And I didn't feel so rushed last time. We got to spend actually more time in the cave. But behind that, right in here, there's a little cutout in the rock. And it's from the floor to the edge of the cutout is, just a few inches. That's where Paul, when he would take a rest while he was up there, he would lay down and put, did I say Paul again?
Yeah.
John. Y'all know I'm talking about John here, right? It's John. This is John's grotto. So if I say Paul, it's John. But when John would put his head, rest his head, he literally laid it in that little cutout in the rock. And the reason that's built is because of people like me. I knelt down and physically got to touch where he had laid his head. And it was just really powerful. This little handhold right here, it's another little groove in the rock. And that's also where he knelt to pray when he was up there. And that little handhold, which the first time we went didn't have brass around it, it was just the cutout. And they probably put the brass around it to protect it from people like me who had to put their hand in it and hold it there. So again, it's just a pretty powerful place to be. And that is where John received the revelation and where he transcribed it for us to read all these thousands of years later.
The other thing is the handhold. He wasn't sticking his hand in there to pray. He was a 90-year-old man that was kneeling to pray. It was to get up.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure my knees still popped when I bent down there. So, kudos to him.
Yep. The other thing that we got to see on the island was the monastery of St. John the Theologian, another name. And this monastery was also built to honor John. And these are just some of the photos there. But I had gone up the area that you see right here below these arches is a courtyard, and that's really about all we got to go in and see. We got to sort of look into one of or two of the chapels. Go ahead and go to the next one. And we got to see a lot of the artwork that is in that area. All of this stuff, you cannot take photos inside of most of the chapels, the churches, whatever you want to call them. This stuff is outside. This stuff has been exposed to the elements for all these hundreds of years. And it was pretty amazing to me that you can still see so much of the detail. I think this is probably a newer thing because these two individuals are related. Let's see, one of them was the donor that sort of donated the funds to build this monastery. Let's see, maybe I've got this in my notes. Christodoulos. And he was the builder, and the other grantor was the Byzantine Emperor Alexius Komnenos. So that depicts them. So that was definitely, something that came later after it was built. But these paintings are on those arches that are just sort of outside the chapel area. And I mean, they're rich in storytelling and graphics, and maybe I didn't do such a good job with getting the photo, but a photo never can capture the whole thing, but it would be like this entire stage being covered with multiple vaults, all of which are just in this ornate decoration with all the different stories of the Bible. And this is a view from up in the cave area or up at the monastery. I can't remember where that specific picture was taken, but it is just a beautiful island. We kind of kidded around, it wouldn't have been this
Populated.
Not populated, but it wouldn't have had the creature comforts that it does today. It was a deserted island back then, but man, what a view. Go ahead. This is just another shot that was taken there at the island that we just thought was really pretty.
Not a bad place to be imprisoned for a few years, in other words.
And this was just some of the local dinner hanging out to sort of air dry a little bit. This is a real thing. They go out, they hunt these things. This is part of their dietary culture. It's not uncommon. Both times that we've been to Greece, we have seen this. And Katie just loves it. It just makes her so happy to see that.
I don't eat anything that God made that intelligent.
We did not.
All right.
And I'm going to turn the baton back over.
So then we're jumping back to Ephesus. And the reason is because, again, Paul came here. That was sort of the end of the journey as far as for us. He did not end his journey there, but he did spend 2.5 years there. But then John started there with Mary. Then he had to go to Rome, then came back and was at Ephesus again, then was imprisoned on Patmos, then ended up back at Ephesus. So Ephesus was kind of a weird one as far as trying to put that in there, but it's central to both of the stories and rather bulky. So we were there June 5th. So it's going to be one of our first days there. It was a very sort of early morning. It was a very packed day. So just bear with me. So I want to point out some of the things on this map. This is a 3D map of the ancient city. So first off, you have the harbor. That's something that we've kind of been seeing, is that most of these towns have a harbor. One of the things I'm going to point out and kind of show you is this main sort of walkway. It has a name, but I do not remember exactly what it's called. But it's this long white thing here, and it is leading up to this, which is the theater, because the theater was sort of the central talking place. Even though this is part of the Roman Empire and it is in Turkey, this was actually still considered part of the Greek or Hellenistic culture. So once again, we've got more temples to pagan gods. This is to the goddess Artemis, the other virgin goddess in the Olympian pantheon. So if you remember last week, I talked about how there were temples to Athena, who was one of the virgin goddesses. Now we're going to be talking about Artemis. So the other thing is, as far as things we had over here, this is going to be the forum. This was actually where we had our devotionals for the day, and that was our first devotional was there. We had 2 devotionals on June 5th because we also had one at John's monastery, which I'll talk about after I finish talking about the general city. Now, these 2 mountains, I don't remember which one. I'm going to get them backwards. One of them, I got all turned around. I was very disoriented and very sleep deprived. One of them has the monastery on it, and one of them houses the home, the last known home of the Virgin Mary. So that is there. This is the rest of the rich city proper. That does not look like that big of a hill until you start walking up it, and then it's a very long hill that makes you sweat when it's 100 degrees, and it was very, very hot. All right, so I mentioned that walkway that we were going to walk up. So over to the side now, there's no longer many of the temples still standing. The thing that's actually standing the most is this building over here, because they took, once again, parts of the old temples, and they made a church. I don't remember what era this church was from, but it is dedicated to St. Mary, Mother of Jesus. It is, you can see it in the background over here. Mom does not like this picture, but you know what? It gives it scale. This is leading down to the ancient harbor, which silted up, so it kept having to move. The city of Ephesus was built multiple times and just kept moving as the further and further out as the harbor kept silting up, because the harbor was essential for commerce. Same kind of thing that we do now. You move where the money is. So
what's interesting now is when we were staying in Kusadasi, and when we went to Ephesus, it's 7 miles inland?
Yes.
So all of, that wonderful soil from the mountains has eroded down and sort of filled in the harbor, 7 miles worth of silt.
Mm-hmm. So if you arrived in the harbor in Ephesus, you had to walk along this grand walkway. It's blocked off here, so you can only kind of use Mom for scale. But this has had a lot of funding go towards Ephesus because it is, I believe, one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And because of that, they have a 3D museum that I've got some videos from. And so it gives you a actual 3D interpretation of what walking up this roadway into the theater of Ephesus would have been like. So you can go ahead. Yes.
Is that roadway concrete?
No, it is solid marble and it is slick.
Everything there was marble and everything. Even fortunately, we were there in dry weather, but it's slick.
Yeah. So this is just one of the verses that is talking about Ephesus. Pretty much all of chapter 19 of Acts is talking about Paul's time in Ephesus. And the reason I pulled this verse here is because you guys are going to get to see the simulated walk that Paul would have taken from the harbor up towards this theater. When they heard this, they were furious. I kind of cut this out. Shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." Soon, she was who the whole city, that was their patron goddess. As soon as the whole city was in uproar, these people seized Gaius, and I'm going to butcher this guy's name, but I'm going to do it how Ed told me to pronounce it. Aristarchus. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, I was going to say starch, but I'm a biologist. All right. Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia. So they were Greeks themselves. Okay. And all of them rushed into the theater together. That's that one little phrase right there of where they're rushing into this walkway, this theater. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Notice that doesn't say God wouldn't let him. That says that his friends held him back. Even some of the officials from the province, friends of Paul, I think that is important to note. He already had friends there that were officials in that place, sent him a message begging him not to venture in the theater. And yet he does. So go ahead. So that video, the far video first. It should go if you just, So this is just a watching thing. You don't really actually have to hear it. It just shows you kind of how long everything would have been, how grand everything would have been as far as it goes. So that's from the harbor. You can see the statues of the Roman emperors up above that archway. The water's not moving with, that's just meant to represent the floor, but it shows you guys those market stalls, the columns, what everything that Mom was standing in would have actually looked like. And then as you keep moving, it has you passing, and you see that big giant building back there that looks vaguely like our modern football stadiums. That's the theater that he was begged not to go into. So this is a graphic representation. This is some of the Roman officials simulating sort of what would have been the scene. So it slowly leads you through that and shows you to the stairs. We were not allowed in. You can go ahead and go to the next one. You'll have to hit it.
There we go.
So we were not allowed to go in this time. However, we had been here before. The reason we weren't allowed in this time is because the theater was unstable from an earthquake a couple of years ago. But we had previously been, the pictures are not that great, but from inside the theater, it's better to see it from the outside. It really was, when I kind of like would joke when I would explain it, it was like Neyland Stadium. And the reason is because you think about this all had to be done back then. That's a person right there. That one little red dot's a person. That's another person. So this thing was huge. We couldn't even get it all in one picture and have it where you can see a person, right? That little red dot right there. That's a person. I forget how many thousands.
I think it's 30,000.
30,000. So modern football stadium, maybe not necessarily Neyland, but it's a lot. Right?
Bigger than Tech, though.
Yeah. Yeah, bigger than Tech. That's for sure. So this was a lot of people in there that got mad. And the reason I use the football analogy is because the way the Bible phrases it, they were rioting. Well, we've seen what riots look like, and we know what happens after football games when they're upset with those refs' calls. It's the same thing. Right.
How did they hear it?
Actually, okay, so the acoustics are so good, I could drop this there and you could hear it. You did
anywhere in
anywhere.
That theater.
Even nowadays, it's that good. So we could stand down and have a conversation. You didn't have to project in the way they did it. It was also, they've done all kinds of things. Perfect circles, like to millimeters. It's absolutely wild what Greek and Roman engineering was able to do. And of course, it's marble. But they were able to do that sort of thing, and I wouldn't have had to talk like this. I would have talked like this, and you all would have heard me. 30,000 people. So,
They could hear the speakers.
yeah, probably they could have. You guys could have heard that. All right, you can go on to the next one, Mom. All right, so this is now sort of telling you all what would have happened. So if you, I didn't want to put all of Acts 19 on here. You'll need to just hit it twice in a row with the arrow when I'm ready. No, not yet. Okay, sorry. You're good. You'll just hit the arrow twice when I get there. Okay, so the next little video is actually of what would have happened. So I said that Artemis was the patron goddess. So when you guys look at the verses, it goes on and talks about how upset the Ephesians were as far as Paul preaching against them idol worship and what they were doing. They just didn't overall approve of it. And the people who were sort of mad about this were actually the ones that were making money off of it. Shocking, right? It wasn't the people who were devout. It was the people making bank off of it. And so they're the ones that kind of go in there and they try to argue with him about this. And I want to point this out before these videos start playing, because I'm going to explain the videos, because it's very powerful when you're in the theater. We went from Artemis as a mother goddess being replaced, and you'll see it is now not known as the city of Artemis. It's known as the last known home of the Virgin Mary. So it's a lot of that replacing the old with the new and sort of correcting that. But here's the interesting thing. This is a secular museum. It's won lots and lots of awards. And yet one of the big things they thought to include on this was the symbolism of Artemis and the silversmith fading to dust, and that dust solidifying and forming Paul and Mary. So,
And the silversmith is
can't-
key in that story. Katie was talking earlier about the people who were making bank. Well, it was the silversmiths, because they were making all of these trinkets of Artemis and selling them to the folks, you know,
mhm.
as
Kind of like how we bought touristy stuff while we were there.
Yeah.
So, all right. Then hit it twice. Just no, hit the arrow twice and it'll
both
play it.
of them.
Boom, boom. No.
No, it didn't.
Here.
twice.
Just do this.
Let me do it my way.
Okay. No. Okay. Now you should be able to go. So they're on the columns up there. You see Artemis fading away and Mary solidifying. Because all of those later temples were taken apart and it was dedicated to Mary and John, the saints of the city.
This theater that we were in, it is an award-winning museum, and it was really cool. It was as big as this room, every bit of it, but taller, and it was screens all the way around. Like, so we were surrounded by, and as you could kind of turn, they had a main thing going on, but you could kind of turn and see like what the people back then maybe would have been doing, and that's all represented in this sort of 360-degree theater. It was pretty
So,
neat.
It was also air conditioned, which was very
Very
nice in
nice.
comparison. In
And then they
comparison to
made
the
us
sweating that we
leave.
were doing.
They said you have 1 minute to get out.
It was very stressful. It was, you must leave or you're going to be trapped. So, all right. So then I said we would talk about the second location we went to. The second location we went to was on a mountain. So over here, this is one of the harbors. There's that theater we just left, okay? Over here is the great temple of Artemis. It's now just one lone little column, because what they did was they stripped it in order to create this castle up here. And this castle is St. John's Basilica. And that, until so many hundred years ago, and I do mean 100, not 1,000, 100 years ago, was the home of his bones. And it was a site dedicated to that. And when did that church get destroyed? Well, that would be when this mosque was created. And so that would have been during like that time period that we talked about last time. I don't have exact dates on that. I was very jet lagged at this point as far as dates. But that would have been during that time when the Ottoman empires conquered those portions of Greece. Okay. Ready? Go ahead. Yep. Okay. So this is, I know it says St. Jean. Most names are actually derived from John. It is St. John, and this is the cover of his tomb. So you see these 4 pillars. They're marble. They're marble. Then you have these marble stones just laying over it. Everything in the way that this church was laid out was so that you could actually go and sort of, you were preached to while the preacher was kind of standing over the Temple of John, and everything was kind of facing towards him. So that's how this whole building was laid out. You can continue. And then once again, we were all hitting the shade because this was late in the afternoon. You can see us all sort of on the peripheries, but this was the baptistry of that particular, I guess it was it a monastery or was it just a basilica?
I think it was a basilica.
I think it was, okay, I think it was just a basilica. So what you're going to see here, this is that same type of baptistry. You would have poured water into these side cisterns, and then these are steps on both sides so that you could walk down, and then you would walk out the other side, signifying, it sort of looks like a cattle dip, I know, but it signifies that you would die here and walk out as a new person. So it was on the one side. We still kind of use that same format today. It's just theirs was in ground. So, and theirs was also lined with marble. So everything was lined with marble. So very fancy baptistry. So that was just to kind of show it. And again, not everything was completely stripped, but it was most of that was used to make that mosque. Go ahead. So this is from down at the Temple of Artemis. This is all that is left of the Temple of Artemis. And this is one of the first iterations of the Temple of Artemis because, as we said, they kept moving. This used to be like the first thing that you would see from the sea. Now it's very, very far away. So right up here, right through here, this tree line right over here is where we had our devotional. But this whole area back up in here and over there, that's the castle. And that is where that St. John's Basilica would reside. Well, the reason that the Muslims did not, when they took over, did not take and just use that facility like they had done with so many other churches, but rather stripped it, was because it did not have the proper alignment to the east. So therefore, they rebuilt it and took a lot of the same materials and stripped it down there. However, they left the tomb. All right.
This Temple of Artemis that's not there anymore with just the column, that's the one that Katie was showing you in the map earlier that was like the predominant feature of the map in the middle.
And it's nothing anymore. So then we did not go here this time, but this is the house of the Virgin Mary. This is her last known address, if you will. And it definitely has been embellished because the church now has it as a sacred site. This is one of the places that you have to cover your head before you enter. If you are a woman, you have to remove ball caps. If you're a man, you are not allowed in here with shorts. You will not be let in. It's seen as a sign of disrespect. Now, this is just a very cool site. We don't really have any pictures of the inside. It's really just a chapel now. This is one of the cooler things, though. Because it is a Catholic site, if you do not know, in Catholicism, you kind of tug on Mary's ear because it's more like a cultural thing in that she's his mom, so therefore she should be able to get him to do what she wants. But pretty much these are prayers to Saint Mary that you pin on the outside wall, not the one that we're facing here in the picture, but the other side and the wall around there, to see just different prayers. So it's just a whole wall of prayers, which is really, really cool. And then once again, we have a baptistry. We like having baptistries, apparently, in the early church because they're everywhere and they're all in ground. So, all right. So then we have Kampala. Now, this is not technically a site of the footsteps of John and Paul, but it is interesting knowledge about the early church, because most of these monasteries were founded, what was this, around 1000 BC or earlier?
Ish, yeah.
And they had this was during a time period where they very much thought you had to become a hermit and isolate yourself. So people would go to these insanely isolated mountains that were sort of more like plateaus. You guys can see how far off everything is. That's a monastery. Okay, I'm going to show you some views here in a second. But pretty much they also thought you had to face death by either purposely starving yourself or climbing up this cliff. And that was your way of showing that you were willing to die for God. I'm pretty sure they would have to put a gun to my head to get me to climb up there, and I'd be like, I'll die on the ground. Thank you. So this was on June 11th. So there's a lot of those kinds of sites. So that's one of the interesting things as far as this. But it's kind of interesting how we've gone for, now we're taking over sites, to now this is going to be a predominantly Christian country. And obviously, these didn't get taken over as much by the Muslims. A little harder to get up there.
Well, and it's a very remote area as well. There's not a lot of population there. It's mostly in the lower areas anyway. You can see some agricultural, so lots of where sort of this is the Greek breadbasket, so to speak, that a lot of their crops are grown in this area, in the foothills, the lower lands of the mountains.
But the wild thing is these are still active monasteries. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So this is from the monastery that we visited. So this is a really good view where you can see it. I stood up on this rock for a really long time trying to get a picture with nobody in it. But you guys can see it. It's just it's a phenomenal view. The way that you had to originally get up there, you could not have made me. And that was to be hoisted in a basket up the side of a cliff. Okay, so have faith in God, not faith in people that make ropes. All right. All right, so this is one of the ones this is still an active monastery. If anyone's wondering how you get up there, if you can faintly see, there's a little cable going across here. And once a week, they will send supplies and food across on this little thing, or anybody that's going to go over there and become a monk. I kind of find it funny. That is the monk one. The female one we drove up to.
The one that we got to visit was at what we would call a nunnery. Over there, they call it a monastery, whether it's nuns or monks, it doesn't really matter. I made the point to I believe it was Pastor Lloyd, because we hung out together a lot, that I thought it was interesting that it was the women who saw the business opportunity in having tourists, letting them to come in and see, part of their life.
Part of their life, yes. So if this looks really familiar too, it's one Screensavers a lot for Microsoft, but it's also in one of the James Bond movies with Sean Connery. So my interesting thing was when I saw this, I was like, somebody had to climb up there for the first time.
Yeah, there's a cable now, but
there didn't used to be.
How did they build that?
Yeah. So somebody had to drag all that up there. So I think that's kind of interesting. All right. So then we'll show some pictures from the monastery. So this is the Talination board. I think I'm saying that correctly. Am I saying that correctly, Ed? So this is reminiscent of the board that they would beat on, that Noah basically would hit and called the animals to the ark. They will hit this, sort of like a gong, but it's a lot better because it's wood. And that is your call to what we would call mass, but it is call to services, basically. So I just thought that was kind of a cool thing. And then this is because you're not allowed to take pictures in there. However, I did somehow, to just forgive the beautiful shot of me, but I had the camera on and I was doing this, and I did somehow manage to take a picture. So up here, you guys can see this is Adam and Eve in the garden. These were actively being painted. The picture I wish I could have got was the stuff where it showed the artists actually working on it and how they did. They were not using stencils.
No.
That's the impressive part about this. Now, the part that I was like, please God, let me get this picture, I just want it for Ed, was this picture over here. Because the wood carvings, this is hand carved wood from the 16th through 1800s when this monastery was being built. And it's these screens, and they're massive screens that would have been about the size of this, right? Covering from where the priests went and said prayers and things like that, and kept sacred relics in here. And I just really like the art aspect of a lot of this trip, because as somebody who likes fiber arts, it's really cool that people could also use those talents to help spread the word, either through painting or something like that of wood carving. And you can, if you've done any kind of wood art, you really appreciate that screen. So, all right. So this is kind of my other weird ideas to pull in. I mentioned earlier John being the son of thunder. And why I mention that is the most famous sort of folk hero and is Hercules. This is also the only photo of Hercules I could use. They really liked depicting men to be strong when they were completely naked. So this was my only option as far as picture. He doesn't look super buff and manly, but this is in Ephesus called the Gates of Hercules. Okay, it's got two different depictions of Hercules on it. This is with him with the Nemean lion. Now, why is that important? Well, the story of Hercules, I feel we've already established last time, Paul was really good at using the culture to explain it. He didn't necessarily demean the parts of the culture that would work. there were already these concepts within the Greek culture. So Hercules was the son of Zeus, who is the great god. He was the god of thunder. Again, hence why I said it's kind of interesting that the one that was sent to lead the Ephesians was John, known as the son of thunder. But Hercules had to undergo trials and tribulations to redeem himself. I just think it would be kind of interesting, and I don't know exactly what he said. But I think if I was trying to explain it, I would be like, Hercules, how he had to do all that? Well, Jesus did that for you. So I think that was kind of interesting. Another interesting thing that I didn't think about till we were coming back, going home, is this lovely gold crown and this box over here. That is the crown of King Philip. And King Philip is the father of Alexander the Great. So this is in his tomb. And what the Greeks did with their dead kings was they placed gold laurels on their head. Again, we talked about the artistry. That is gold filigree leaves that look like leaves. It's like a real, looks exactly like oak leaves with little acorns. Again, I just think that's maybe something interesting, that our God was crowned with a crown of thorns in death. They would crown theirs as well with shrubberies. So that was kind of cool. And then, of course, there's also Thermopylae. That was the Greek uniting myth. Greece was not united as a culture. The united culture that you saw when we were talking about, these are all the Hellenistic cultures. That didn't happen until 300 Spartans sacrificed themselves so that the rest of Greece would get a little bit more time. Same kinds of underlying themes that I think I would have used if I was a missionary back then. All right, so kind of some lessons that we had of our own miracles. So I'm going to let Mom tell the story of this one over here. But I just want to point out one of the things that we learned, and we didn't have animals and donkeys walking around. It's how dusty it is. That's my feet. That's Mary's feet. That black part is the clean part of our shoes where our toes were.
That's the way they started.
Yeah, So that just tells you how dusty it was. And that was going to one city for a few hours. Okay, I'll let Mom talk, and then I'll explain the toilet.
So, we've told you all about all of these really neat things that we got to see, and just how it sort of tied in for us spiritually and whatnot. There were a few little life lessons that we learned on this trip as well. And I didn't even realize Katie had taken this picture, but there was an episode at the very beginning of the trip when we flew from Nashville to Dulles, which is in DC, from Dulles to Zurich, Switzerland, and from Switzerland to Izmir, Turkey, which is roughly in the area where Smyrna was. So those 3 flights, we get to Washington, everything's going well. We get to Zurich after we found a place that we could get a couple of hours of sleep. We were back at a cafe, and I looked at my cell phone. I had an air tracker in my luggage, and I pulled up my air tracker, and I went, my luggage is in Frankfurt, Germany. And so come to find out, my luggage and 15 others were lost. Most of them were lost in Dulles.
Of about what?
Of 42, 15 were lost. Of us 4 that were traveling together, 3 were lost.
I was the only one with all of their luggage. I was also the only one that had an international charger. You want to talk about learning to communicate and share early in the trip? That was it.
Yeah.
Because none of us brought an actual camera with batteries. We all brought our cell phones to take pictures.
So that was kind of how we started out. And it was interesting because they said, it'll be at your hotel tomorrow night. And long story short, we ended up it was holiday weekend and in Turkey, a Muslim holiday. So everybody was off for the weekend. It was a 4-day weekend, and they weren't sure they were going to be able to get our luggage to us. And finally, when I was talking with these folks, I said, now, listen, I'm not just talking about my luggage. I'm talking about there's 2 other people that I'm traveling with. There's 15 people in our group that don't have their luggage. And we're getting on a boat tomorrow. If you all don't get us our luggage tonight, then you're going to be responsible for shipping it to Athens, because that was the truth. They are responsible for getting it back to you. And so they said, we don't know if we can get anybody. At one point, we were looking at taking a cab an hour north to try to go to the airport to get our own bags. We couldn't have possibly brought back everybody's bags.
But we didn't know if we had every bag because Mary and Lou didn't have trackers. So we were just going on faith to get her bag and pay 130 euros to get one bag.
So anyway, about the happiest phone call I've ever received is when I got one at 2:30 that night and said, your bag is in the lobby. So
I jumped up out of bed and I had my
Katie
bag.
was more excited than I was. She said, you didn't seem to be that worried about it. And I was like, well, I wasn't really. I had 3 outfits. We always swap one out, and I always put one in my carry-on. So all I needed was socks, and I was good to go. But
that was miracle number 1. So the reason there's a toilet up here, does anybody notice what's missing from the toilet? That's not a mistake. That's the culture.
Oh, and this is one of the nicer ones.
Yes, it was not a pit toilet that you had to squat over. It actually, you could balance basically. And the other thing is they don't put toilet paper down the toilet. So there's also always an adjacent really gross trash can. So on the last day in Berea, our pastor for the evening, Rob, he goes, we've all learned things, but I think we're all ready to go home, ready for our own toilets. And he lost the group for several minutes.
Laughed. Everybody just broke.
And I had
down.
actually, Mom was like, we should have got a picture of the toilet. So I was like, I did. And she was like, yes, thank you. So it's the small things. And, I had to use a pit toilet one time during this, or twice. And it's literally a hole in the ground that you have to stand over. And I still had toilet paper. Paul didn't have toilet paper. He also had to deal with donkeys. So I felt really, really thankful for all of those things. It makes you appreciate some little things. However, something that we're always thankful for, we were fed really well on this trip. They really like potatoes. And I really appreciate Greek cooking, and that's as a Southern girl. These are the best green beans I've ever had in my life, and that is as a Southern woman. They do something different to them. Don't ask me what. We were fed really, really well. That's what I want to point out. However, there's one I wanted to point out. It's on the next. Is this. Mom had this about every single meal.
It's Greek salad. It was amazing.
Greek salad, cucumbers, tomatoes, all of those things were local, including the feta.
In season.
In season. She had this at least once a day.
I had it for breakfast a couple of days, y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. So go ahead. This was what the buffets looked like at night. The reason I got this picture is I wanted for scale. That's a bowl of just Parmesan.
Is this what Paulie or John?
I'm guessing based on who lived the longest, this probably would have been John. But I don't think they ate it. But culturally, the food was basically the same. Go ahead. By the way, this is their fast food. Once again, you see that. That's tzatziki, which is heaven. It's a yogurt dish, but they use it like ketchup. You literally put it on everything. There's chicken kebabs. That was all like less than $20. And that was fast food.
There was
for them.
two orders of those chicken kebabs.
Yeah.
For that.
So
price.
it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And then one more slides of food. I'm getting you guys ready for dinner. So over there, pastries are really, really big for breakfast. This is gas station food. Is gelato. I had gelato for breakfast because I can't eat the pastries that they eat. Because nobody would be happy because there's one bathroom on the bus and we all have to sit with it for hours. So nobody would have been happy if I had ate that. This is actually sardines.
And they were pretty good.
Weirdly good.
Yeah.
They were weirdly good. The corn's not as good as Charles's, though. I will caveat that. But the last little thing is, and this was actually my birthday night dessert, because my birthday was on the trip. We were in Corinth for it. It was really kind of a magical birthday for that. This is honey and just yogurt. And now for those of you who are not microbiology, applied micro backgrounds, yogurt is literally made by sticking milk and letting it ferment. It's just naturally occurring. And they were like, yeah, it's just a super traditional dessert. And that's just something they just are like offhand comment. And I'm like, it's literally milk and honey. It's one of their oldest known dessert recipes, and it's literally milk and honey. And I turned to Mom and told her that. That is also a dessert that I actually now use. It is wonderful. Their yogurt's also different over there.
Much thicker, creamier.
Yeah,
better.
it's much thicker. It's less sugar.
Yes, for sure.
So
that's why they can add honey to
the,
it.
okay, I think that's the last slide.
I believe it is.
The
That's it.
last one I will tell you guys, when we left, the day that we left, we couldn't get our boarding passes. We didn't think that was weird. We're exhausted. We've been going for 10 days. And we get to the airport, and they're like, oh, no, you're not booked on our flight.
All 4 of us.
All 4 of us. And
we had a confirmation.
yeah, we had a confirmation. So there was a whole bunch of running around doing things. We all worked remarkably well together. And I was just sitting there like, it's okay. You're just going to be trapped in Athens. That's fine. But I was like, this is a test. This is a test of what you retained on this trip. So please don't get mad. It's like, be calm, because you're where you're supposed to be. So that was kind of my fun little thing.
And oddly, we were all calm.
We were all calm. I mean, it's hard to be upset when you're trapped with where you can just, go and get fast food that looks like this and gelato that good at a gas station. But we were very calm until they went, we're holding the plane for you. Run.
We have you. So they put us on an earlier plane, not a later plane. They put us on an earlier plane and said, literally, they told us, we are holding the plane for you. Get there as quick as you can. So you've seen these 2 old women and
yeah, so
2
run,
young women running through the airport in Athens.
It was the old school. They didn't even have the little cattle chute that they stick you through. We had to go down a flight of stairs holding luggage and then run across a tarmac to hit a bus. And then the bus took us, and then we had to run up more steps, and we were the last ones on the plane. So, but we got on that flight, and then it was just getting home and trying to process all this. But I will say, you guys may see stuff that we didn't. Literally, that one slide was just some of the stuff I thought of later going through, because this is one of those trips you can spend a lifetime processing everything that you saw.
Yeah. As Katie said a couple of weeks ago, we're still unpacking it. I mean, there was a lot that went on. I was really proud that she didn't get arrested in Canada as we were coming back through. We had to go through customs.
And we hadn't been out of touch with every news organization in the United States.
The whole
it was
10 days
wonderful.
that we were over there. It was glorious. And so we're going through, and you have to choose, is it international or is it domestic? Of course, we're in Canada, so we're like going through the international, and Katie goes, well, I guess it's international unless Trump annexed it while we were out.
I didn't say it like that. I said, unless the orange man annexed it.
The orange man annexed it while we were gone. And the look the security guard gave her.
They didn't find it funny.
Oh, he did not find the humor in that at
all.
It
was a girl. But yeah, she did not find it funny. So I was like,
sense of humor.
I was like, okay. And I just was like, all right, you didn't find that funny. I was like, that was a joke. And just kind of kept going. So anyway, that's once again, my mouth is constantly what is being told to be quiet. So that's how I have to listen to the Lord. But so yeah.
Any questions about today?
Today or last time, if you've got questions. I'm sure.
That's it.
Ed, do you have anything else to?
No, other than when we started at the first, we read from the Bible and then you get to see the actual spots. That's pretty, very significant. And in some of those transitions, because the Muslim invasion all through this area throughout the centuries, and yet what started out the temple to Artemis is now, the emphasis is on Mary's house, and those kind of things. God's just kind of just doing His thing along, and still His message is being spoken, not the past of that.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that Ephesus, that whole museum, that's in a predominantly Muslim country, and yet they chose to focus on Paul being in that theater.
Yep.
So exactly what Ed's saying.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hopefully we made y'all hungry. We don't have food today. Yeah, exactly. No, just the sardines today.